So now we're getting to the crux of the matter. We've got actually two parts to this talk. The first part is Neil Buchanan here, who's going to talk about he's part of the Bearsden Shark Group. And then also we've got a video that Neil Clark, who's of the Hunterian, he recorded it. He's not been able to come here because he's on holiday, being Easter holidays. So we'll have a short video presentation from him. He's doing a talk. His talk is mainly about the fauna that was found in Bearsden when they were doing the dig, and he'll talk about the different. Well, before getting any further, this is a copy of the shark. So if anybody's wanting, as you're leaving, to have a wee look at it, I mean, it's quite distinctive. But you'll see lots of pictures up here, as you've already seen. So first, I'd like to introduce Neil Buchanan. He's from the Bearsden Shark Group. He's talking about Stan Wood was the person that found, Stan Wood is the person who could see a fossil a mile off. And he recognised that there was fossils at this Manse Burn excavation. So they had a huge excavation. You'll see pictures of that. And they found various sharks, but the main one was this fully preserved shark. So Neil's in the Bearsden Shark Group. He'll tell you all about the Bearsden Shark Group. And he'll also talk about Professor Long's book on the history of sharks and the new project that they're going to be coming up with. So I'd like to introduce Neil Buchanan, Bearsden Shark Group. Once we get the thing working.
Okay.
Okay, Neil.
I think so. Can you hear me? Yes. I'm glad I've got this because my wife says I talk with a quiet voice and she never hears me. So I've now had to go to get her hearing dealt with. Anyway, I'm very pleased to be here because your society has been very supportive of the Shark Group. And Neil Clark has been mentioned. Neil has been hugely supportive because Neil, when I first met Neil, I hadn't realised his PhD had involved some of the work which Stan Wood provided from Bearsden. Now, I think the way to start is to talk about Agminition Zangerli. Zangerli is the easy bit, but because that's the name of a paleontologist from a long time ago. The Agminition is a wee bit more interesting because it took me a long while to realise that's to do with the anvil hammerhead on the dorsal fin of the shark. And that's what makes it, in its own way, unique. I'm a civil engineer. I became involved in heavy engineering. I became involved through all sorts of things over the years, becoming involved with the ground, the soils, piling, foundations, and eventually environmental stuff, even doing the landfills, how to design a landfill in this modern age. I did enough. I never really was an expert in anything. So I'm in danger of talking to you about some things you all know a bit more than I do. But from my point of view, and we occasionally have been able to speak to school children, and much to my surprise, school children know quite a lot of these things. When I talk about the tectonic plates, they know about the tectonic plates. My particular interest with the tectonic plates is not only do they move around the world, but at one time you have, as you can see from the screen here, there is a split, if I can get this thing to work properly. No, that's, oh, there we are. Up there, there's a little bit, and that's Scotland. And the bigger bit down here is the rest of the UK. So my story is Scotland at one time was part of what became the American subcontinent, the North American one, and Scotland was never part, or our part of Scotland was never part of England, never mind Europe. So that is a wee bit more clear here, nearer the time of the shark. And it was only recently when I went to the Kelvin Grove Art Gallery and Museum, I saw they have the geotechnical periods laid out beautifully in the area of paleontology. And the Carboniferous period is ours, and you've got Scotland sitting up there, so that you can see that it's near to the equator. So, you know, the whole shift takes you through totally different environmental periods. What was the environment at that time round about this area? And I'm grateful again to Neil Clark, because this is an adaptation of one that he produced. Number one is shallow, muddied sea. And 3 close by is tropical forest, floodplain, sea at times. So we had a warm climate. The sea temperature, I believe, was around about 15 degrees, which is a bit comfortable nowadays. And you're talking also in terms of, at one time, round about then, seas were 120 metres higher than they are now. So there's a whole series of stories you can build around that. Again, from the museum, it gives you an idea of the tropical forests that existed, as well as the coral sea. I suppose the coral sea is a wee bit more surprising than the forests. The geology around this area of Bearsden is very much from the Carboniferous period. So you're talking of forests, you're talking of coals, and I'm pushing too quick. You can see that the different levels of coals, for instance, and of course sandstones and shales. Now the interesting thing is, I live in the area, as Stan Wood incidentally did. I'll tell you more about that. But that area has shallow mine workings. And in fact, within the Buljaffrey area of Bearsden, in the 1960s, Lawrence, if you're old enough, you'd have known Lawrence as one of the great house builders in that part of the world. They had treated a mine shaft within the Buljaffrey area. And I guess it now would be maybe 30 years ago, that mine shaft, they had at the very beginning in the 60s capped it, and the cap failed, so it had to be redone. And I know that the nearby golf course, the golf course have had to deal with pump holes. So we're talking of an environment where people like Stan Wood, what would you say, is a guy who started off in the Merchant Navy. I can't remember what he did before that. He was an apprentice somewhere. But he then became in the Merchant Navy as an engineer. He was persuaded, turned to white-collar work, and that was the days when maybe white-collar work was more attractive. So Stan began to sell insurance, probably because it's a dull job. Forgive me if anybody's involved in that. But he decided that he had developed an interest in the environment. He became an amateur fossil hunter. And long before he came to Bearsden, he was making or finding so many fossils he could actually sell and implement his income. So he decided he wanted to become involved more with geology and went to Newcastle University, and he took an open university, not a Newcastle degree, in geology. And from there he became more involved. For whatever reason, he moved to Bearsden. And the story varies, partly, and we have a little booklet that we have written, and partly that tells a story of children came to Stanwood to say, once they realised what his interests were, that there were interesting fossils down in the Manse Burn, which runs between Buljaffrey and the next housing estate, Bonotton. So Stan had a look. He saw enough to persuade the Hunterian in 1981 to fund an exploratory dig. So in 1982, they gave the funds to do a major dig. Now, again, not many of you will have heard of YOP, Youth Opportunities Programme, and that was where they were giving young people experience of work. So there were the people from the Hunterian proper, there were YOP people who conducted the dig. That's Stan, and that's where it's a fairly deep dig. And you can see the layering of it, which meant that it was ideal for looking for fossils. It's a big dig, and the things that you'll see in a moment I wonder about is, could we do that today without all the safety precautions? There'd be risk assessments, there'd be barriers up, there'd be fencing. The important thing being to enable that dig, to divert the Manse Burn round the back. Now, quality, but that's just a photograph I took from an old photograph in a paper. But Stan was a clever man. He involved the children in the neighbourhood. Every Wednesday afternoon, they came to the site, and they gave them, in fact, a local man, you can just see maybe a hammer there. A local man had made hammers at his work and donated them to the exploration site. So children would come along on the Wednesday. That's how they well, let's say, were talked to by the people conducting the dig. Again, safety, we go overboard. You could have 30, 40 school children on a Wednesday afternoon. Now, one of the reasons I think Stan was clever, if you involve the local school children, you're going to have less vandalism because they are involved in the site. They partly possess it. So it's not just a matter of teaching them. Ultimately, what came out of the dig, and there's a guy called Stephen Knutson, was one of the YOP people, and he had been put onto the site for 2 weeks, and he came across something or other which he described as it was mushy, but he called over Stan, and Stan took it away. 2 weeks was all he had on site. He was back in the Hunterian when Stan gave him a call to come up to see him in his office, and he actually thought he was going to get a row because when Stephen, let's say, exposed it and obviously lifted it a bit, it split. But no, this is what he wanted to show Stephen, the most perfect, what would you say, shark fossil anywhere in the world of this particular species. So perfect that the stomach, you could tell what the last supper had been, or last meal had been. And of course it was shrimps and the likes from that time. What's also remarkable is that looks like a skeleton, but it's not bone, it's cartilage. At that time they didn't have bones. but more about bones in a wee while. And whenever I talk to other groups, particularly people less knowledgeable than yourselves, it's a triple SI site. You cannot dig in it. But we have come across people a couple of times, and yeah, they took the hint. If you know Bearsden at all, this is about Southwell Jaffrey area. You've got the Stockymuir Road going out to Drimmen, Duntauker Road, obviously, and in there you have, at the bottom, you're heading to Bearsden town centre. So this is the burn that runs to wherever, and where the arrow is where the excavation was. Quite a narrow area. Having, what would you say, left the site alone since it was backfilled, and the reason it was backfilled was because somebody had, well, quicker than they thought, somebody had broken the bund that kept the water away. But nowadays, and 1922, there was an event where the park ranger from Mugdock, who took an interest in this way back at the beginning, he took a party around to see, and he had quite a number of people willing to pay £10 or what it was to have a guided tour. But at one time, there were no trees. You could see things, you could walk down by the burn, but not now. And that's nature taking its course. In 2005 or thereabouts, the group was formed. And one of the first things they wanted to do was to mark the site. And this is fencing that went over the burn. There was a path with fencing. And with the help of the council contractors, we got that put into the top side of the footpath. And we had a cairn built and an information board put on it. It has lasted quite well. I was talking about, the risks of vandalism and such like. The first one was a plasticky material, and after a few years there was enough of a hammer blow or two blows to replace it with metal. And there's a little dent now, but that weighs fairly heavily in our thinking for where we're going. And this is Neil Clark and the provost of the day when this was opened. And it was interesting, the publicity we got at that time, because one of the committee and Neil were even interviewed on STV, Scottish News. And all the technical journals, not just the local press, gave us very good coverage. So, where can you see the shark today? We've talked about the site. The other place is the Hunterian, and the original is hung in the Hunterian. And there are some splendid presentations in the Hunterian, not only of what was found at our site, if I can call it our site, but there was a number of years later, another burn not very far away, but out with Bearsden, another excavation took place. And Neil would never tell me where it was. I had an idea, but the whole idea was to keep it secret, because if people began to know about it, they would join in the excavation. This is the original hanging in the Hunterian. And there are other samples from this site and the other site, this being one of them at the bottom. The other place that you can see things is the Bearsden hub. Now, those of you who know Bearsden, you'll know the hub has been closed for some 2 years because of a concrete problem, the poor concrete in buildings. So that's what we had in the hub at Bearsden. Neil had given us a plaster copy of the original, and I'll be interested to see this one here. So at that time, Neil said there were 8 copies made. If you break it, then we'll never be able to take another one from the original because of the fear of damage. Nowadays, of course, with 3D scanning, it's quite a different world. So with paper information and with video information there. The book by Professor John Long from Adelaide in Australia. Neil had let me know that John was doing a presentation at the Hunterian itself of his new book. And his book is one which is about 440 pages, and it covers the very first shark that's known right up to date. So it's a dense volume, and I must admit that I've only read selected parts. But he's actually given 3 pages to Stan Wood, and he's given 3 pages to the Bearsden shark. And the interesting thing about Stan Wood is he was so enthusiastic. As a student, John had been over in England for a conference on paleontology, not just sharks. But Stan had gone up to tell him about his collection because although he was an amateur, he had a vast collection and he was well known for it. So he invited John up to his house to see his collection, and John did that for several days. And he spoke very highly of Stan. So that's John Long. That's Stephen Knutson, I've mentioned as the yacht man. You'll know Neil Clark, I'm sure. What's the future as far as the society's, the group is concerned? We recognised there was a problem where we had marked the site is between 2 housing estates, and really the only people seeing it, no matter how much publicity we tried to put around Bearsden, the only people who really saw it was the people walking back and forward. So it became a thought of we either finish there or we try and keep things going. What's the best way to do it? Well, the best thing to do is to do something in the centre of the town. The centre of the town being at Bearsden Cross, where you have the hub, which used to be a sports hall, but they converted it into what they now call hubs with all the facilities in the one building. So we have been looking at how to do this bronze sculpture. We're also looking at how we keep things going in the future, so merchandising is becoming a thing. We did publish a booklet, and we've sold reasonable numbers, but that sort of thing is fairly limited. But we're going to be doing other things, and one of the things which is interesting is, thank you, that is a paperweight, and you have a little shark in there. Now that's the only evidence we had of what that shark might be like. So we decided as part of this new exercise to get a 3D scan done, which we have. And from that 3D scan, I have a 12-year-old grandson who became fascinated by the shark, and he got for himself, well, he didn't get it for himself, it wasn't Santa either, but he got a Christmas present. And that's one of his 3D scans. And is it perfect? Is it the right colour? Who knows what colour people have to think about? So the exercise is to use that kind of technology to make things, hopefully, that we can sell to bring in income, to keep things going in the long term. The other thing we've talked about, and I need to talk about this fairly carefully, because what we thought of at one time is how do we make people more interested, more aware? And it's not just the people of Bearsden, but maybe visitors to Bearsden. What does Bearsden have? Nothing, you could say, because it didn't exist until the railways came. And it was, Bearsden is called after a house where they, for whatever reason, built the station. Nothing else except a house. But there's the Roman wall. And at the one end, not very far from our site, is the Court Hill fortlet. And along that bit, you have two bits of the base. You'll know that the wall is a stone base, but earth above it. So there's two bits exposed. You come into the city at the town centre, and you have the Roman baths, which are famous for the quality of them in Scotland, as well as there was a bigger fort across the road from it. And then as you go back out, you have this thing, again, the two excavations in the Beauclair Cemetery. So we thought, well, there's a walk. We can maybe look at creating a trail in Bearsden. And by the way, we can divert it to the site of the shark. So we've talked about it with various people. And one person in Milngavie who's involved in these things said, well, just need to warn you that we are looking at a new, as there is down in England, the Hadrian's Wall walk, we're looking at an Antonine walk. And I'm saying, well, I don't see anything wrong with that. If we're here before you, it becomes part of the Antonine Wall walk. But that's the future. Where will this sculpture be exhibited? This is the hub. And I've actually got all sorts of problems at the moment. We've been working on it now for many months. But I had made contact with the council, and the head of a department who's responsible for these things was very supportive. And before I actually was communicating within our own group how well that meeting had gone, I had a girl called Lucy saying, I'm here to give you your license to occupy. I'm saying, well, we haven't started the final design, we haven't started getting prices, but that's great. So they have been very good from that point of view. And the place that we are looking to have it is here, partly because there's a wall behind it, partly because there's a paved area up there. So we can fit in a plinth and we can fit in the sculpture on top of it, as well as information panels. The only thing is, after certainly 2 months, 3 months, there's some details of the original building I haven't got. And you've got to look at, if we were to put in a sandstone plinth, the weight could be anywhere between 0.5 ton and 1.5 tons. How do you get it in? So that's one problem. The weight of it is another, so it needs a foundation. And I need to know where their foundations are exactly. So we're not going to cause damage to the building structure itself. This is the 3D scan which I got done by a crowd called 3D Scotland, just a small Glasgow organisation who do specialist work. And really, in many ways, we haven't improved much beyond that. Neil Clark's daughter, Catriona, is an artist who deals with sculptures, and she knows the people who do castings. So very pleased that she was willing to come on board. I thought the first one was ugly. I think that's even uglier. And the teeth. Neil was actually very keen that we got the teeth right, because it's such an important part of the type of beastie it is. Up until just a few weeks ago, we knew about the the top of the dorsal fin. And I was led to believe at the time, and I think it was Neil who thought so at that time, and others beyond Neil, there were needles up in the top and needles on the head. But what Neil is now talking about is these are teeth. So we had put an item into the local paper, and we got a very good coverage. So people read about that. There was another bit inside that repeated what the paper had published in 1982. Out of that came an article by a BBC journalist writing on the BBC app. And out of that went to Neil an interview with Talk Radio. Now, I was lucky because Neil kept a recording of it. Have you ever come across a good program being broadcast at 3 o'clock in the morning? So people, I don't know how they listen to it, but 3 o'clock in the morning. But it was a brilliant. The interviewer was super, and Neil was super. And there's so much came across, I think anybody and everybody would hear that. Whether I need to get permission or not, we hope to put that recording onto our website blog. That will come. So that was Catriona's first stab at it. This was another one which he sketched. You wanted to do something that was characteristic of the environment the shark was in. And I nearly fainted because I had my costs based on one shark. And I told them, no, it's going to cost more. So they went to the people who do the casting of bronze, and they said, well, one is one, two is twice as much, which was maybe fairly obvious. So the design process goes on. This was a development from Catriona, based basically in the two shark concept. And this is our latest one. Now, the problem that we now have is an interesting one. Theft and vandalism. Okay, we had a wee bit of vandalism at the information board panel at the site. And lo and behold, was it 6 weeks ago, 2 months ago, there was a photograph in all of the papers, all of the TVs, about a boxer statue down south. It was man-sized, and the photograph they had in the paper was all that was left was his feet. It had been stolen because of the bronze. So we have been talking to insurers about bronze, and the response is, no, we don't insure for vandalism or theft. Well, why else would you want to insure? And we're still going through that. So something quite as sophisticated as that I don't think will happen. It's more likely to be, I've got two prices for a plinth. One is the sandstone block. The other one is, if I can put it as simply as retaining wall blocks, concrete blocks, hollow. So it's cheaper to build. We don't have heavy lifting to get it into the site. We don't have all sorts of worries. So it's more likely to be a shark almost sitting in the sandstone slab that will be whichever way at the top. Images, well, this is my toy time. That's the original one you've seen. This is one where, if I remember rightly, the professor at the time the shark was found, and I suspect was there when Stan Wood did his work at the university. He is regarded even by Neil Clark as the expert on the Bearsden shark species. And this is one of his artistic outputs a long time ago. So They've got them in the head, they've got them in the anvil at the top of the dorsal fin, but it's, remember, teeth and not pins. This is also by him trying to create something in the environment. And you can see that he's a pretty good artist. This is a painting. Stan Wood opened a shop in Edinburgh, and it's called Mr. Wood's Fossil Shop. And if you ever go into it, it's magnificent stuff he has. None of it's cheap, but none of it's poor quality. He had managed the shop for Stan when Stan went away in his escapades around the country and maybe even the world. And Matt Dale is his name. He bought it when Stan decided to move on. I don't think he ever retired as such, but to move on. So this is the painting that a specialist painter in fish and the likes did for Matt. And all of these we have permission to reproduce if it's, we're a non-profit making organisation, and people have been very good at giving us permission. That's what we started off with in that paperweight. There's a wonderful guy called John Birrell, and again it was Neil Clark put me in touch with him because he makes models. Neil, for instance, he had one of those fossils. He wanted a copy made of it, and it wasn't a big one. Now, I've seen it, the copy. And this guy, John Birrell, is who he goes to. And John Birrell, well, he wasn't affronted, but he was kind of laughing because it was John who told me the story. Neil had come with this fossil to be done, and he said, John, I'm not leaving your side. This fossil is so rare, it cannot be damaged. So Neil was there for all of the time to create the copy. But off the cuff and using this shark as it was in the cube, it's about a foot long, and he did another version of it. And the idea was, would people like to buy something like that? Well, who can tell? But John can make them. Local Bearsden Church, 2022 was the date, where there had been a competition set up by the Scottish Government for people who wanted funds to encourage poetry. So there is a poem that's written about the Bearsden Shark. So the organisation, they don't like to call themselves the church, but they come from the church, had got the money to do their thing. And they had a magnificent week where they involved children's events, making of sharks, finding sharks in the shops. And this is what they used to generate interest in it. So I like it because it's only a shark I've seen that smiles. And that's where we stand at the moment with all of the things we have. Where do we go from here? Well, we have started looking for funds, and we started off on the basis of one shark. We were looking for £12,000. And we're a long way from going through all of the organisations we want to approach for funding, but we're already over £6,000, so we're pleased with the reception. And your society is one of the major contributors. It is a matter of refining design, and we can't quite refine the design until we get the last information from the council. But we will then go on to things like crowdfunding and the likes. But insurance is a wee worry, because one of the realisations is if it's vandalised or stolen to the extent of we don't have enough money to put up a new shark, the problem then becomes the council are not going to want this block of something or other sitting in front. So we need to build up funds also that goes beyond the project itself. But watch this space. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Neil. And
first of all, thank you very much for coming this evening. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to make it. I'm up in Aberdeen today for a few days over the Easter break. But what I want to talk to you is a little bit about the Bearsden fauna and what it actually means. And to do that, what we have is a look at the original dig. This is Stan Wood, who initiated the dig back in 1981. He discovered a number of fossils in the Manse Burn up near Baljaffrey, and proceeded with funding and help from the Hunterian Museum to excavate some of the rock and collect a lot of the fossils. And he was able to include quite a number of other people as well, not just the Hunterian, but he also liked to involve the local children and opened the site to them once a week so that they could find their own fossils. Sometimes there was over 70 children present at the dig. And it helped them understand a little bit about the environment, the rocks, the fossils that were very close to their home. Now, the excavation itself was done by Stan Wood, a couple of youth opportunity assistants, 2 more helpers from the Glasgow Geological Society, and there were also a number of Glasgow University students and local people who helped out with the dig. The total area of the dig was about 30 metres by 15, with about 5 metres depth being excavated after the Manse Burn was diverted slightly. This is what the dig looked like, and you'll see lots of little squares. These squares were put down so that they could identify the orientation and the position of a variety of different fossils that were being dug up. And this helped to plot where the fossils were in relation to each other, and also the depth to which they were found as well. And all this feeds into our understanding of the paleo environment. Here's a picture of a group of school students down having a look through some of the rubble that was left behind after the first excavation. So what was found? I'll concentrate on the sharks, but initially what I'll do is I shall show you a few of the other animals and things that were found there. There were some plants, but the plants were not particularly well preserved. The vast majority of the fossils included these shrimps. This one's Palomyces, which I described back in 1982, I think. So this was quite soon after I'd finished my PhD. 1992, I think, sorry, not 1982, 1992, just after I'd finished my PhD. So the excavation was in 1982, and it wasn't really until 1992 that the first scientific publications really started coming out. And one of the reasons why these fossils are so important and so well preserved is because they've been preserved through phosphatization. And this is a process where even the soft tissue has been replaced by calcium phosphate to the extent where you can see the blood vessels, muscle blocks, and you can see some of the blood vessels on this picture. This is an enlargement of Palomyces itself, and you can see lots of blood vessels and muscles and all kinds of things that have been preserved in the fossil shrimp. Then, of course, there's the Telecaris that was named after the people of Glasgow. This is an example of it that's in the Hunterian. I think this one's on display in the Hunterian Museum. Teleocharis weegii was only first described in 2024. So even though the excavations happened in the 1980s, it's still producing material that's going to be published. There's going to be another paper published perhaps next year on Crangopsis, which is another shrimp that's been found associated with these at Bearsden as well. This is a weird one, Britannicus rankini. This is one that's the best preserved examples of its kind in the world, and these were found at Bearsden. They were also found in a number of other locations, and one recently turned up. A member of GeoNatter found one of these at Blairskaith Quarry, and it was just recently published in the Scottish Journal of Geology, so well worth having a look at and see if you can find other examples of this particular shrimp. But it's a beautiful, weird shrimp that nobody really knows what it was and what it's related to. But again, this was only described, this new genus was first described in 2020. Of the fish, there's Mesopoma carici. This is named after one of the people who helped out on the excavations back in the 1980s. This is a lovely Paleonicid fish, beautifully preserved. There's also Rhizodus. This is a scale of Rhizodus. The actual size of the scale is about the size of the palm of your hand. So it's quite a big scale, and the fish itself was huge. And the teeth of this animal can grow to sizes that are bigger than that of a T-Rex. So it's a very big and very toothy fish. And then there were some sharks. This is Tristichius. This is the spine of a shark, and as you can see, all that's left of it really is the spine of the shark, because very rarely do you get the entire body of the shark preserved, because it's preserved in cartilage, and cartilage does not preserve particularly well in a fossil record. So this one's Tristichius. This is an important one. Try and remember that name because I'll mention it later on as well. Acanthodes. This is a strange early spiny shark that is also found at Bearsden. This one's quite important as well. Deltoptychius. This is a ratfish or a chimerid. This is a shell-crunching shark. It's absolutely beautifully preserved as well. You've got the entire head, the entire body, and the fin at the end as well. So it's helped us understand better what we normally find as just the teeth or tooth plates of these kinds of animals. So Bearsden is very important to helping us understand more about these animals. And of course, there's Stethacanthidae, perhaps. This is one that's very like the Bearsden shark, very like Cacomnistion. This one we've only got the head preserved of, and the head is huge. It's about 40 centimeters across, so it's a very big example of a shark from Bearsden. We also have Dania. This is a very small shark, but again, it's beautifully preserved. The entire skeleton is preserved. It's not the most aesthetic of sharks, but it's there. You can see the vertebral column. You can see the head on this example. We've also got complete Hilodus sharks, something that's very rare in the fossil record as well, known usually only from the teeth. This is a beautiful shark, but it's another shell-crunching tooth type shark. Fulcatus. This is a very strange shark. This is one where the structure in the back of the head points forwards in almost like a spike. And you find this at Bearsden. This wasn't known at the time of the excavation. Quite a lot of these sharks were not known at the time of the excavation, but have subsequently been found in the rocks of exactly the same horizon elsewhere. Aristeacanthus, again, this is a weird shark with an ice cream cone-like structure in the back of the head, but it points upwards rather than pointing forwards like in Fulcatus. This one points straight upwards. And then there's this. This is a weird one called an iniopterygian. This is a complete iniopterygian. In the past, these were only known from North America. So they are a very unusual and exceedingly rare form of shark. And this one turned up at another excavation, not too far from Bearsden, but not in Bearsden itself, as did quite a number of other animals. So this is a weird one because it's got very big pectoral fins, and it's also known as the flying shark. So if you went back to the middle of the Carboniferous, about 330 million years ago, maybe you would see flying sharks, a very interesting form of shark that obviously does not exist today. And of course, the other thing that was obviously found was the Bearsden shark itself. And you'll see presumably a number of pictures of this. This is a picture that was taken by Keith Ingham, lately of this society, where he dumped the shark into toluene and stood over a bath of toluene, taking long photographs of the shark so that he would be able to see the difference in the refractive indices of the cartilage and the bone to the shale. So it brings a good contrast to the image of the shark. And it helps us understand a lot more about the anatomy of the shark from images as well. And in the bottom left, this is Stanwood again. This is an example of the Bearsden shark that is in Cambridge. There's a number of examples of the Bearsden shark, but you'll see the one that we have in Glasgow is obviously the best preserved one that has the full anatomy of the shark presented to us on a plate of shale. Now, what does all this mean? Well, if we look at the section that was excavated at Bearsden, you'll see that it was divided into 5 beds, well, 6 beds, the Tallposey limestone being at the base, and then bed A, bed B, bed C, bed D, bed E. These were beds that were named by Stanwood. The bottom one being the shrimp member, where most of the shrimps came from, the Posidonia member, and then some of the other ones that were mostly lacked fossils, but there were a few fossils in them, but they're not so important to the story of Bearsden itself. So this on the right is a list of all the fossils that have been found associated with the sharks at Bearsden. So once we put these into order of which bed they're found in, we find that some of the fish were found in bed A. All the shrimps are found in bed A. None of the shrimps were found in bed B, but all the shrimps are found in bed A. Quite a few of the fish, but only 2 of the sharks. The Acanthodes, which was the spiny shark, and Tristichius. Remember that Tristichius that we had at the beginning, which was just a spine of the shark, that was found in bed A. In bed B, there's all the other sharks. There's some shrimps, there's conodonts. There's no shrimps, there's some fish, there's some sharks, conodonts, and there's one fish that was found both in bed A and bed B. And we suspect that was because bed A represented a more freshwater influence in the sedimentary cycle at this time, and bed B represented more marine, or more open to the sea, at least to marine incursions section, where we get a lot more of the marine fish and sharks. So we can split it very easily between the freshwater shrimp bed and the marine Posidonia member, where you get Acmenistion, the Iniopterygians, Halodus, Deltoptychius, Falcatus, and all the other sharks in those shales. Now, if we plot all the localities where these fossils are found, we've got the ones around Glasgow. The ones that you see On the east coast, the Ardross, Gullin, and Broomhouse and Muirhouse, they're of a slightly different age, so they're not really related to the discoveries of Bearsden. But all the ones around Glasgow, the Corrie Burn, Spouthead, Peel Glen, Locker Mill, Powgray Burn, East Kilbride, Hindle Glen, and Swinleys Glen, these are all localities where the Bearsden fauna has been found. And once you put it all together and try to understand exactly what was going on at that time, you find that what we're looking at is really a restricted lagoonal basin with occasional marine input. So the lagoon itself was blocked off when the shrimps were around, when Tristichius was living there. There was a lot of freshwater input into this lagoon, but then occasionally the marine waters would invade into the lagoon, bringing with it a lot of the marine sharks and other organisms as well. So where was Britain at that time? Well, Scotland was right pretty much slap bang on the equator, where the Bearsden shales are. But you can see in this image that it looks like it's mostly landlocked. But obviously there were incursions of water into that area occasionally throughout the period of time that the Bearsden shales were being deposited. And if you want to come to the Hunterian, please do so. We still have the Bearsden shark on display with some of the other sharks and also some of the shrimps as well. It's well worth a visit if you haven't had a chance yet to see it. And thank you very much for listening.